Back to another video. We're looking at Bitcoin. This is Mike, and basically I've seen some weird price action at the highs, and it's prompted me to look at the bigger pattern, and for me to take a stance on a expanded B wave correction here is actually quite a weird process. It's something that I've considered in the past, but it's way too complicated for me to explain it. So in this video I'm going to try and explain it, but it's not going to be easy, right? Unless you understand AriasWave, you're not going to really understand the complexity of what I'm talking about. Or maybe you've watched enough of my videos to understand what I'm going to say. So the B wave, at the moment, seems the most complex wave in this structure so far, right? Because everything else is pretty straightforward. If we had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if wave 1 actually ended all the way back here at the end of February, we saw an A. That's all we saw. It's keeping it simple, right? I expected back here that this would move up because I thought this would be, the C wave at some point, right? I thought that if we saw a CDE pattern, we would see a CDE movement. It doesn't work out too well when you look at it that way. But the problem here is that, you know, you have something that looks like a zigzag here. So you have an A, looks like a B, could assume it's a C, assume it's a D, E, and then we went for that dip. But obviously it bounced, so I was wrong. Now, I assumed at some point, I gave it thought that maybe it could be a zigzag within a zigzag. And at the moment, I can't really fault this particular view because it's ridiculous. Why would Bitcoin come all the way back down again in this move if it hasn't already moved down? And the reason for that is because of the D wave within the B wave was expanded. It's problematic. It's complicated, right? But it's the only explanation I can offer at this point, because I can't say that this was wrong. This was a D. This was an E. And then I thought it was going to be the start of wave 3. But why would it bounce? It doesn't make sense. The only way it makes sense is if this is a correction within a correction, right? So the B wave might have just ended of the B in brackets of a B wave zigzag, right? So where's the rest of it? So the first move down was here. It never made a new low, so I couldn't really count it as a 5-wave move on its own. It had to be part of a structure. We had an A wave bounce, right? If we look closely at this structure, you can see that there's a zigzag in here too, right? The problem that I had was trying to assume there was that was a B, that was a C, there was a D and an E. This is the problem with trading corrections. This is why I typically don't do it. But whilst we're here and whilst it's taking up all our time, we might as well try to make some profit off it. So in that case, if this is an A, this is a B, a C, this whole thing must be a D wave, right? A D wave. The bounce was an E wave. Now we need to make one more low to complete this crazy B wave pattern, right? And then we should get a C wave bounce. And the reason why I think this is credible is because if you look at AVAX, we're expecting a move higher, right? I'm expecting a move higher. Where's that going to come from, right? It's going to come from Bitcoin also making a move higher. So I thought it might have been this move potentially, but even my 90K target was still pretty limited. So if we come down, AVAX doesn't make a new low in its pattern. The C wave bounce will cause AVAX to go higher, quite a bit higher. So this is important. It's very interesting. And I'll explain to you why by switching to the AVAX chart real quick, right? I produced a video on this recently, and you can see that here we had an A, B, C, right? So we need a D and an E before we come crashing down. Is this producing the D wave now? Could be. Could be. So what that means is that in the greater scheme of things, right? If this is going to be a zigzag up for AVAX, we need to see a low put in, right? And that low, I think, is coming in Bitcoin, right? It sort of also applies to Thorchain as well, with the same sort of thing, right? So if we quickly go to Thorchain, right, you can see that price hasn't really moved much since I posted that video or that chart or whatever, right? We haven't broken the low. If Bitcoin comes down the way that I'm saying that it might, well, this really can't do that. It's literally going to be immune to that move down in Bitcoin because it seems to be a lot of strength left in Thorchain. So therefore, it might actually pop up to $11 when Bitcoin starts Wave C, right? So we've got to pay attention to this as we go along because it might be a really good long opportunity. So pay attention to that. But the reason why I don't think Bitcoin's going to go down straight away is because looking at those charts, there's just no way it's ready to move down, as in Wave 3 down. Even though this could easily paint the picture of it, I've seen too much now for me to build the case that no, it's just going to be one more low. So that's great, short-term trade. If we break that low, which I mentioned, 83,000, right? Now, if we don't break that low, 83,000, okay, fine. Maybe 90,000 is still on the cards. Maybe we retest that 1,000 period moving average. But so far, it seems to be getting rejected at every time it tries to move above the 200 period. And now it doesn't seem to be much different for the time being, right? If we completed this B wave down, because technically in a B wave down, the trend is down. Until we get a C wave bounce, then the trend can be up temporarily. And the reason why I'm calling it a B wave of a wave 2 is because, well, for a C wave bounce to be going up this high and an A wave to go that high, then we've probably already made the first 5 wave move down since the all-time high. I just have a feeling that we had a complex wave 2 at the highs, followed by a sharp wave 4 at the lows. So to keep this pattern simple, there's no rules broken. I think that this is probably the likely scenario for Bitcoin. Wave 1 down already happened. Wave A already happened. Wave B almost completed. Wave C incoming. But first, we need to see a move beneath the low, it break down and then reverse up, right? So basically anybody who's shorting this, if they don't take profits at the lows, will get basically squeezed out. And yeah, and basically we'll see a bounce after that. So this is my preferred count at the moment. It's just seeming more like it at the moment. I don't think that this particular bounce has any legs to it. I think it's just part of a complex correction. So that's it for this video. I don't really envision anything too fancy happening here. Is this actually the top of this move? I'd have to say yes, most likely, especially if we break below 83,000. And the reason for that is because, well, you have what appears to be a 5-wave move. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I know it seems weird, but I just don't think it has enough energy to push higher, especially with these rejections at the highs. Look at this 5-wave move down, another 5-wave move down. look, anything is possible with Bitcoin. It could do it, but if you zoom into the small degree, right, that last rejection we had, you can see that it's created an A, B, C, D, E, and it's at resistance. 5-minute chart, 1,000 period moving average. The crossover happened when we had this 5-wave move down, which I thought was a C wave, but these patterns are so mucky at the small degree at the highs. This move up is characteristics of this move. It's very weak, right? That Trump news pause, tariff pause news, whatever, that was the strongest part of the move. It seems like a wave 3. But the whole move is weak. It had a very deep correction. It bounced this and that here and there. Right? I think it's an A, B, C, D, E, small wave 5. I mean, it's possible. It's a very shit pattern. I don't really like it too much. I don't like any of these patterns. This looks like a 3-wave move. If it's not a CDE, then it's just a zigzag, right? An A, B, C, D, E, small wave 5. I mean, it's just too hard to tell at this point. Are we forming a small head and shoulders pattern here, like a small one? Look, it's very possible. I wouldn't be surprised. The move down overnight was pretty sharp. We have a correction. Look, 85,493 line in the sand, in my opinion. I think this could be a 1, 2, right? An A, B, C, D, E. These tiny patterns are very shit to discern. They're not easy at all to recognize and understand. But it makes a lot of sense. Sharp move down. It's the same kind of thing that I did when I took that short trade back here, right? We didn't see a break of the low, but we did see a sharp move and a correction. We did break lower. I think the same thing is happening now. It's a repeat performance, right? You got the sharp 5-wave move, a correction, bang. Back here, sharp wave move, a correction, bang. So, look, I think that's very possible at this point. I'm leaning towards it. It's not a massive trade. It's pretty short term, but it's what comes later that is important. But if you don't have any idea at all where this is going in the near term, then it's hard to formulate trades and to plan for what comes next, right? If you thought this was the beginning of wave 3 when it starts moving lower, then you'd easily just leave it on and get bounced again, right? It bounces, you lose your profits. Best thing to do, let it drop. If it falls, take your profit, wait. Wait for my next update. If it forms a 1-2 pattern or a series of 1-2s, as I've seen when these moves started to happen down at the lows, then we can get ready to trade that higher. So at this point, that's what I suggest. I know it's shit, right? But you're looking at the same chart I am. This is going to keep chopping out. But you will get decisive moves, especially in wave C, that you can actually make some nice gains off. And then we've got to wait for the rest of the pattern to unfold. So a CDE pattern is incoming, potentially going to look like a zigzag maybe. We don't know. Could be like C, D, E before wave 2 is over and we get a reversal. So I think we still have this type of structure left to go once we hit that low. So keep that in mind and keep, stay tuned, and I will post updates as we see price action unfold. Right now, just to end this video off, look, I said go long last night, but the price action dictates what we do. Did you get stopped out? No. You should still be in the trade, technically. It's your decision which way you think it's going to go, right? That's why we do analysis. At the moment, the evidence has mounted too much for me to maintain my long position. So therefore, I'm switching it around. Resistance 85493. If you want better, more longer term resistance, 86506. And I'll catch you on the next one.